Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do a mini lesson on completing the square. You've already done completing the square in Algebra 1, you've done it again in Algebra 2. However, we're going to need it for all these conic sections. So, again, completing the square. Now, remember, if I have an x squared plus 2x plus 1, that's no problem. I can factor this x by breaking up the first term. I can break up the last term, 1 and 1, plus. That gives me x plus 1 squared. So we have a term that is squared. It's a perfect square. Now, if we were to actually solve this, if it were equal to 0, then we would simply set each piece equal to 0, only needing 1 in this case, x equals -1. Now, if on the other hand we have x squared plus 2x minus 5 equals 0. Our problem here is that no matter how I attempt to factor this, I cannot make factors of 5 that will somehow make 2. So in this case, our standard unfoil method will not work. What we're going to need to do is make a perfect square out of it. Now, for those of you playing along at home, we can always use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. Quadratic meaning square, quadratic equation, quadratic formula. So we can always use this, but again, this is fairly long and cumbersome. So we're going to say x squared plus 2x plus blank equals. Now, the blank is made because if I take this 5 here and I move it across, now since this is a minus 5, of course, we're going to add 5. So I add 5 to both sides. I have x squared plus 2x plus blank equals 5. Now, the question becomes, what could I put in that blank that would allow me to have two factors that are exactly the same, which means it's going to have to be some sort of perfect square. The way we do this is we take the middle number and we're going to divide that middle number by 2. If I do that, I get 1. If I square whatever my result is, 1 squared, 1 times 1 is 1, that's my perfect square. Now, of course, you can't randomly put plus 1 on one side of the equation without putting plus 1 on the other side of the equation. So this is going to equal 6. Now, how do I factor x squared plus 2x plus 1? Well, break it up 1 and 1. And now I have x plus 1, the quantity squared, equals 6. Now, to solve this, I would simply take x plus 1, the quantity squared, equals 6, and square root both sides. If I do that, I get x plus 1 here and plus or minus root 6 over here. Well, all I have yet to do now is to subtract 1 from both sides. Now, I cannot ever take a integer away from a radical. So my answer is going to be -1 plus or minus root 6. There it is. Now, we could also solve it using the quadratic formula. So let's bring this over here. X squared plus 2x minus 5 equals 0. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals -5. I'm going to use the quadratic formula and say opposite of 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times -5 all over 2 times 1. Putting all of that together, I have positive 20, positive 24, -2 plus or minus the square root of 24 all over 2. If I factor this down, -2 plus or minus 2 root 6 all over 2. Factor out a 2, top and bottom, and I come up with -1 plus or minus root 6. That is completing the square. We end up with the exact same answer. So, quick review. Given a problem, x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. I'm going to move the offending term to the other side. X squared minus 4x plus blank equals positive 7 using addition. And I'm going to figure out what is 4 divided by 2 and then square it, so that is 4. So I come up with x minus 2 equals 7. X minus 2 squared equals 7. If I solve at this point, x minus 2 equals the square root of 7 plus or minus. X equals 2 plus or minus root 7. Middle term divided by 2, then square it. If for some reason you have a problem where it is not a 1 as the leading coefficient, like for example this 4, you cannot complete the square as is. What you must do is simply divide both sides by whatever the leading coefficient is, and then begin the process again. And so on and so forth. Okay, now what we're going to need to do now is you have a little bit of homework. I want you to complete the square on the following problems. X squared minus 6x minus 14 equals 0. And number 2, 2x squared plus 12x minus 26 equals 0. And for number 3, we're going to want to go with x to the 4th minus 4x squared minus 1 equals 0. Now again, don't freak out because this is a 4th power. All you have to do is, instead of breaking it into an x and an x term, you will end up with x squared and x squared, and then that just adds an additional problem to solve. So that's your homework. Press pause, copy it, be able to turn it in.